Welcome to episode 1 of Beside Ourselves, a podcast on AI adoption for business. We are Beside, a partnership of technology consultants linked by a common goal to help small and medium sized companies use AI not to replace their teams, but to empower them to work smarter. We set up this podcast to help you make sense of the fast moving world of AI. The industry evolves incredibly fast, so we created a place to slow down and provide some much needed analysis and level headed commentary. My name is Theo. I'm CEO at a technology consultancy based in Cologne in Germany. Right beside me are Giles, fractional CIO based near Cambridge in the UK, and Rutger, fractional CMO based in Utrecht in the Netherlands. Hi guys, good to have you.
Hi, Theo. Yeah, excited to have the conversation.
Hi, Theo. Nice to be here.
In each episode, we will each pick a key event, trend, or story and focus on its impact. Why it matters to you, and how you should prepare for it. Let's get started. Giles, first with you. I hear that people have been chewing your ear about the AI bubble this week.
Yes, thanks, Theo. Yeah, that was a very a topic that was very much at the forefront of my mind. And here in the UK, at least, I don't know what it's been like over where you guys are. It's been quite prevalent in the news in the last few weeks. Is that kind of, I guess, feeling, sense, worry? You can probably drop any word in there that you want. The kind of investment cycle that we're seeing around AI technology is unsustainable, and that we're kind of heading in that same direction that we did many years ago with the whole .com boom, then bust. And I think, for people of our sort of age who can remember that, and let's be honest, there many senior leaders in businesses, similar age to us, so they can all remember that. I think that's naturally introducing an element of anxiety, I guess, and fear into that. So I did a little bit digging. I've been all the major, media outlets have been talking about this for the last few weeks. So I did a little kind of digging. I mean, I'm not an economist myself, but I thought I'd do a little bit digging to see what I could find. So, it was interesting, actually. The Google CEO, he was actually interviewed by the BBC last week, and even he was kind of quoting a few things around that. I think his words were, what I write down here, was, he says that the current wave of AI spending carries elements of irrationality in it. So if you've got the head of Google who's investing quite large sums of money saying things like that, then I think even at that level, they understand that. But I guess the fear is, in the same way it was in the .com boom, that a lot of the valuations have been placed on these businesses. A lot of the investment you're seeing in these businesses has been driven by a lot of hype. There's a lot of speculative belief that this is the next big thing. There's no, in some instances, in fact, a lot of instances, there's not really proven profitability and even revenue on some of these businesses, but still they kind of grow. And a lot of these are companies, again, similar to the .com, they're prioritizing sort of growth and market share over things around profitability. I don't think it's quite as bad as that. I mean, obviously in the .com era, you're seeing websites, spinning up that were selling bananas and all sorts of things that had valuations on it. I think it's a little different in that sense, but you're seeing a lot of that sort of stuff going on. And of course, remember that even in that .com boom, some of the big companies we know now, like Amazon, Cisco, and the such like, they were all around then, and they went through some big readjustments to their market capitalization. I remember at the time as Amazon's shares dropped to like $6 or something, which made, everybody laughed at them at the time. I mean, obviously look at them now, they're one of the biggest companies on the planet, but it took them a long time to recover from that. So there's a lot of kind of fear around that. I think one of the other interesting differences that we're seeing this time as well is a lot of the investment ecosystem is going between these bigger businesses. So you're seeing a lot of these businesses like your Microsofts, your OpenAIs, your NVIDIAs, your Amazons, they're all negotiating deals between themselves. So a lot of this valuation is actually almost driven around between the organizations. So again, it's a bit like, this kind of circular money that's moving around, that's being, in some instances, like your Amazons, like your Apples and people like that, is being funded by their own cash reserves and their own business reserves. For others, it's being funded by, investment and stuff like that. So it's like, well, where does this money actually reside, and who? So again, that's a concern. Alongside that as well, I think, and we might come on to talk a bit more about this in some of the other conversations we have, there is there's this feeling that the investment that's been put in maybe outside of, at the kind of small business level is not necessarily delivering value. And I think, again, there was some evidence that MIT did some research. They interviewed a whole lot of companies that are investing a lot of money in this space, and they came back and said actually 95% of those business weren't seeing any return on investment from that. They were throwing a lot of money at this space, and weren't seeing an investment. So I think, coming back to my original point and where my conversation is kicking off, I think we're seeing these sort of things being reported. There's that sense of anxiety around, are we heading down a dot-com boom? And I know that I've had at least 2 conversations in the last week alone, and many more before that, where people are sort of non-technical executives of businesses are coming to me and they're feeling there's the element of cautiousness that's been driven by this uncertainty. So they're sort of saying, well, where should we be investing? Or if we're going to go into AI, we want to go into AI, we can see that AI is an opportunity, but which company should we be choosing? Should we be going with an OpenAI or a Claude or a Microsoft, because what if, maybe not a Microsoft, but what if some of these companies we choose no longer exist? How do we make that choice? And when we invest that money, because a lot of these things are not cheap, how do we guarantee, or as best we can guarantee, we get that return on investment? So, yeah, I guess that was the topic was really around that anxiety that I'm feeling in the conversations I'm having in the market around this kind of impending market realignment that people are seeing, and how that impacts their decisions. So I guess if I share my takeaways and then maybe we can have a conversation about it, I guess what I generally say to people is, yep, there's likely to be a market realignment, market correction. These things always happen when you see significant growth in a market. There always is some element of realignment. But again, like of all things, pensions plans and stuff, it's a long term, and you've got to take a long term view. And just because that's happening doesn't mean to say we should be avoiding these technologies, because even the market realignment happens, then that those technologies will exist. With the larger vendors like your Amazons, your Microsofts, your Apple to a slightly lesser extent, they're investing billions of pounds, some maybe even combined trillions of pounds in the infrastructure that's going to exist to these sort of things. So you're seeing large capital investments that are going up. I think when the market realignment comes, where what's likely to happen is, yes, there will be impacts across it, but I guess those smaller vendors, those more niche vendors that might be impacted, and even those ones that are really successful, you would assume would be swallowed up by the larger vendors as well. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to just completely disappear. Apple's a classic example of this, where you're seeing they are, I think, accepted to be behind the curve in their adoption, but they have a large war chest in terms of cash reserves. So you would expect them to be, at the moment, they're just partnering with organizations like Google to provide a lot of their AI technology as they develop their own. But you can imagine they'd be ripe in the market to cherry pick some of that and stuff and bring it through. I guess, and then the 2 final things I'll just end on, I think I would say to everybody is, one, you'd obviously need to have a sensible vendor adoption and tool selection plan or approach to that, and these things need to be factored into it. Don't just go with, not picking on Microsoft, but Microsoft Copilot, just because it's Microsoft, it's choosing the right tools for the right job. And then the other thing as well is actually having a kind of a clear and sustainable adoption roadmap, so that you're bringing these things on at the right points in your business life cycle that's addressing, I guess this is talking about the return on investment, making sure you're addressing real business issues that you have, that you can measure, and that you can therefore determine that you're getting that return on investment. Anyway, I'll stop talking, see what you guys think. That was just the thing that sort of jumped out at me. So
there is so much to say about this, and it is obviously incredibly topical and very emotive. But from all the interesting things that you said, I'm just going to snap onto just one thing there. You mentioned about the sensible vendor selection or tool selection. And from a slightly more practical perspective, how can a business or a business leader that might be listening to us now tell if a certain vendor or a system is good enough, is stable, is secure enough to serve them through the downturn? What advice would you give them there?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, a good question. And I'll caveat all of this with saying I'm not an economist, I'm a technologist. So I will come with it. It's like, but I think actually, looking at it as a business, I mean, strategically, I mean, you need to look at actually, I mean, obviously the longevity of the business, what's the business history? what's its investment cycles it's been through, who are its investors and who are its backers. They're going to be quite interesting things to look at, because they're going to give you a sense of actually, what's the long-term strategy for this? How sustainable is it? Does it have the financial muscle to be able to see itself through there? Or does it have the backing of, partner organizations and the such like? They're going to help it through that. So OpenAI will be a classic example. We all know, when they first hit the market with ChatGPT, Microsoft were very quick to get in there and invest. They've readjusted that relationship now recently as they've moved from a not-for-profit to having a profit arm as well. But we all know the amount of investment in there. We also know, there is a revenue cycle against there. Pretty much everybody is using ChatGPT. I imagine most people are using that. So, as a partner, you would suspect that something like that's gonna last. I think it's more those niche organizations, those smaller startups. They're the ones that you need to kind of look at with caution, because they're the ones that like to be most susceptible, the ones that have been bootstrapped, don't have a significant amount of backing behind them. Going in against those sort of organizations, I think, why I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not trying to dismiss those organizations. I think they're the ones you need to go in with your eyes open. I think the larger, more stable vendors are probably going to be the safer bets. But again, it's like everything in life, isn't it? It's that kind of risk reward sort of, benefit risk type side of things where you need to weigh up, and each individual organization is going to have a different profile, really. So,
Yeah, that's right.
That's great, Giles. Thanks. And yeah, I fully agree also with the uncertainty in the AI landscape. Let's put it like that, with all the investments and where to put your bets. I have an additional question to that. It might be even the $1 billion question. Is what are your thoughts on this AI bubble, and do you think it will collapse perhaps? But do you have any expectations when that will happen, and what type of like elements will drive the collapse?
Seeing that you are an economist, as you said multiple times on
I
the
was going
call.
to say, and if I had that answer, quite frankly, no disrespect, gents, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be sitting there with my stocks and shares waiting to sell at the right moment. I mean, yeah, I'd be honest, I have no idea. I think, again, the .com, there's a model there that we've seen. It was quite effective. I mean, from memory, and it is quite a long time ago, that did run for quite a while before there was a correction. I think actually that, if anything, is going to drive the market, would be my guess, because, we're talking about it here. Everybody's talking about it. The finance houses, everybody's aware of it. They're like, actually, this can't continue at this pace. So I think, and the kind of the global economy as it is in a slightly different place now as well than it was back then. In terms of all the things that we know that are going about getting political on around the world, regionally and in countries and stuff like that as well. So I think there's probably going to be, in my mind, when it comes, I'd say I'm not an economist. I'll say that again, but my sense is I don't think it'll be a crash in the way that maybe it was in the .com one. I think there will be a realignment, a readjustment, and I think we'll see a slowing pace. I'm kind of hopeful there won't be a crash. It'll be a kind of realignment and stuff, and that there will be certain companies that are already at the fore. I think they're going to be sort of driving that. I think that's the other big difference was back in the .com is a lot of those big companies that were getting a lot of money were companies that nobody had heard of five years before, whereas now, you're seeing a lot of the bigger players are in that. Like another good example would be Facebook. They missed the mobile bandwagon and regretted that, so now they're all in on the AI one, love or loathe Facebook. They're obviously backing that. I guess I haven't given you an answer, and I'll be brutally honest. I don't know would be the other answer, but my hope and sense
Correct
with it
answer,
wouldn't
right?
be as big a disaster as it was last time around. He says,
Yes.
crossing fingers and touching wood.
Very good. So,
Sorry.
as Giles contemplates getting his economics degree, let's move over to you. And you get some thoughts or some stories to share us about the reality of AI adoption versus the ambition.
Yes, for sure, Theo. I think What I've noticed also from all the conversations over the past, I would say like almost years, there is something that, how to say that, um, I recognize in the various conversations, and that is that people talk about AI adoption in various different levels. You see people, and I think this is actually where the majority is AI adoption being referencing towards using ChatGPT as a side tool. So of course, people write blog posts, and now you can get a perfect draft, a first draft from ChatGPT, and that speeds up the process to publish your blog post. But in the AI landscape, it's moving way faster, and all those developments towards like workflows, AI workflows, even into agentic AI, where things are almost like independently being operational and getting all the tasks being done for you. And there is a gap between those two things where you see people talking about AI adoption and using, yeah, the generic tools as like a side tool versus the developments and the capabilities of the AI landscape that are available to us. And I basically want to elaborate on this topic in three different ways. Why I think that the adoption is a little bit behind the developments, and I think the gap is only getting bigger. The first point is actually that people don't really take the time to really think how to embed AI within their company or daily how to say that, like work processes. So they're still stuck to their own traditional habits, how they do their job, and then at a certain moment there is a tool they wanna use it. They use it on as a side tool, rather than stepping back and see like what can AI actually improve on my daily work or in my daily work. And I think that is lacking. A lot of people don't take the time to really discover this AI landscape and see what tools are available to adopt, and that would speed up the process. So basically, how I always phrase it is they keep on cycling rather than stop building the car and then you take over the cyclist. And this is what I've seen and discussed a lot, and I think the gap is there getting bigger as well.
But that's what I
Um,
was expecting more on the cyclist side, but
well, that's evolving too. I think people, of course, get more involved into the generic AI tooling, and they start using it more, but not really like rescoping it in terms of like how it can work in their favor. Um, a second development in this alignment of like the gap is that you see that a lot of companies, or also like on an individual level, is that they get blocked, that the adoption get blocked. And what I mean by that is like you need trust, there is internal governance, and of course the overwhelming landscape of AI tools that is showing up almost on a daily basis. There are new tools available or that get introduced to me or to others. And where do you start? Where do you select the right tool at the right moment? This is somewhat related to my first point in terms of like stepping back and think about like what are my bottlenecks, what AI could solve, and taking the time for that and develop a plan for that. But internal governance, or I would say that like a difference between, for example, your team manager who's more traditional and you want to move fast forward with AI, can also be a blocker. So there are like many things that block you from like sustainable AI adoption in that sense. And you see it on a company level, on a team level, individual level. It takes place on all those levels, so to say. Last part of that is also like the cultural involvement. So a company can be very innovative driven, um, and yeah, support people to adopt AI, and other companies are way more keeping it off in terms of like, yeah, this is a threat. We need to have a plan in place first in those type of like companies. So culturally, there is a big shift there too. And the last thing I want to mention between this gap between like AI adoption and AI innovation is really about the FOMO. There's a lot of buzz and a lot of people talking about AI. Uh, in my opinion, also a lot of fluffy talk and open doors, because people feel the anxiety of missing the boat, and but they don't know where to start. So they know that the developments go fast. It frustrates them in a sense that where do I start? How can I be part of this um, wave of this AI wave? Let's put it like that. Um, and yeah, you see that they get frustrated about this type of enablement. They don't know what type of steps to take in order to move forward with AI in a constructive and sustainable manner, so to say.
All right. Thank you so much, Rutger. Giles, you have a question?
Yes, I love this subject. No, that's really good, Rick. I like it. Yeah, I really like that idea of, you've got your large language models, your chat GPTs, and that's where most people are. And obviously then you have the concept of workflows and then more agentic solutions, which I know is the kind of buzzword everybody hears at the moment. But on the basis that most people are still in that kind of chat GPT large language model basis, be that chat GPT, Copilot, whatever, can you give some practical examples? So, if you're speaking to somebody who's a business leader who's just using that and they want to move along there, or they want to improve their sophistication of using it, and they want to maybe move into considering things like some AI workflows. Can you give some practical examples about how people could consider approaching that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an amazing question, actually, because I brought this up in my topic as like a threat or being overwhelmed. But saying the fact that there are many different AI agents showing up on almost a daily basis provides also a lot of opportunity. They all provide their own type of solution in their own type of way. And I think it's really about considering what are my business goals? What am I trying to achieve? What is the purpose of what I'm doing? And considering that leaves up the opportunity, opens up the opportunity to explore how AI can help you moving forward. And of course, it takes time and research to figure out what type of tool would fit you best. But this is also related to your topic, Giles, earlier in the podcast, about how do you choose your tooling, and what are the criteria in order to sign up for it or not. But I think the key argument to me is start thinking about what you need from a business perspective. What are you trying to achieve? Because that's always the starting point. And AI, in fact, is still just the tooling to get there. And there are various ways you can stick to your own traditional way of working, but you can also explore new ways of facilitating your workflow. And I think that brings a lot of opportunity. So it's more about figure out what your objectives are. What are you trying to
Mm.
achieve from a business point of view? And tailor your research in the AI landscape towards that, to refine and find finally in the end the right AI tool that helps you moving forward and benefit from this efficiency, or doing things faster, or even driving additional results due to the AI enablement.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
like that. It's you find a real problem in your business and then use that as the thing to design the workflow around, rather than just sort of just aimlessly trying to build something. No, that's good. Cool. I like that.
Yeah. From my side, we've got the toolkit, the agents that are available. All these things are fantastic, but a big interest that I have is the cultural element. How do you align your teams and their expectations, their abilities, their capabilities? How you build capabilities? And you mentioned earlier that a lot of companies that want to adopt AI, they run into cultural problems. Can you give us some examples of that? And what can you, if you're a business leader, if you're a CEO, what can you do to help your team overcome these cultural issues?
Yes, this is a great question as well, Theo. And I can definitely elaborate a little bit on that. I think I mentioned it earlier in a part in this podcast, but um, I see a very, how to say that, like, also a big gap between the different levels of AI adoption that I was referring to, but also on an individual level. It can be me and you, but also on a team level. Compare, for example, that marketing within the company is way further into AI than HR, as an example. But also on company level, where you see like, especially the larger companies, they they don't have this fast moving advantage of like we can quickly adopt new tactics within AI. It takes more time to refine a larger sized business. And I think it is an opportunity, especially for small and medium-sized businesses, or and the smaller you are, I think the more flexible you can be in this type of like adoption, is to basically align these type of like principles and objectives within the AI landscape. So consider this to be like, if your marketing team is way more advanced in AI adoption, make it an objective to apply the learnings of this AI efficiency towards other teams, and to find alignment in the pros and cons of the different implementations that you take. On an individual level, it's kind of like clear. We have people that are very hungry for a new type of like tech developments within AI, versus the more like legacy people that say like, I want to stick to the old. I do my job for 30 years in this particular way. I feel threatened. So you you already
Everybody's
see this
right.
type of like, how to say that, like different, completely different perspectives on all those different levels. And m- with the cultural background, I think it's more about like, make sure that you as a company open up this opportunity for AI, but do it in a sustainable, predictive, and how to say that, well prepared way. And this aligns also to the point what I mentioned earlier, is like, connect your business goals, um, and apply that to team level and individual levels, and then you can really provide a lot of like empowerment to individuals and teams to say like, find your way to move forward, and harvest the benefits that AI can bring.
All right. That's great stuff. So to move on to the final topic that I'll introduce, it will build up a little bit on your point, Rutger, but it's primarily it has to do with the first qualitative study that we have now on how people actually use ChatGPT. Now, traditionally, we haven't had a whole lot of data or analytics about what is the content of AI conversations. But a few months back, some 47,000 chats were leaked out of ChatGPT because of a system error. And a journalist from the Washington Post actually sourced them, analyzed them, ran a few models, and then a bunch of statistics came out of it, but I want to hone in onto two of them that I find extremely interesting. Now, the first one is a 10-to-1 ratio between a positive versus a negative response. That is to say that when you ask ChatGPT something, or you bring it a premise and you kind of, its response is 10 times more likely to be positive, as in a yes, than it is a no. No matter how ridiculous the premise of the question, whether it contains falsehoods or whatever. It is, sometimes I think of it as an algorithmic yes man, like a sycophant that will sit
Mm,
always his shoulder and always say yes, master, to anything that you ask, right? And it can create a bit of a personal echo chamber in the sense that you always get somebody responding positively to what you already think. It looks like this is not a bug, it's a feature, and it is designed for engagement. We all like to be agreed with, and of course, OpenAI knows that if they introduce a bias to confirm what we already think, we're more likely to stick around. For businesses, however, that use ChatGPT, we need to be mindful that this is bad for decision making. If you know that you have got like this digital sycophant on your shoulder and it's always telling you yes to what you want to hear, you're not going to be exposed to counter arguments. You're not
mm,
going to hear it if something is a bad idea, right? So if you do use ChatGPT for business, make sure that your team is aware of this tendency and that you provide perhaps some training to watch out for it. The second really key stat that I gleaned from that article was about the purpose of the chat. There was quite a lot in there about, I mean, we use it for coding, we use it for personal music, for editing, summarization, all these things as you would expect. But 35% of all chats, more than a third of them, were actually for searching for specific stuff, which is an astonishing statistic. And it has a huge impact on marketing. Why? Because, first of all, traffic volume. Is your brand included when a user is searching for stuff on ChatGPT or the other bots? It's about message control. How is the ChatGPT discussing your business and against what competition? Up until now, this ranking and how the AI responds is a bit of a black box. We don't really have the kind of like the if this then that kind of tools like search consoles that we have in the in the classic SEO world. What we do know is that context is important. That is to say that ChatGPT will give you a certain answer, taking into account the rest of the conversation. So potentially one of the implications here is that you as a um, brand stakeholder, you might see a drop in traffic, but the traffic that you do get might be readier to convert because it has arrived from a more contextualized background. There's all sorts of stuff happening on the back of that. OpenAI announced a shopping agent. You can give it just a very broad description of what you're after, and it will do the research for you and bring you the results. We do know from conversations so far that businesses are aware that this has been happening, but we think that this is now being turbocharged. There is a real sense of urgency, and we do advise people to start preparing to kind of broaden the horizon from the classical SEO to a more kind of all-encompassing AI optimization practice. It's a really, really interesting part of what is happening over here, and that study at the Post really provided the background for it.
That's really that's is actually quite shocking, that number, actually, isn't it? That you think that how many people are using it as they kind of go to place. And I know, although maybe I'm old school, I still use Google, but even Google obviously has their AI interpretation of the results first. And I know that I naturally will read that first before I go into the results further down. So I guess my question around that leaps to my mind is for um, the businesses out there that obviously have built their web real estate, are coming from a marketing background, a traditional marketing background, that's all about target audience, target customer profiles, keyword densities and all that kind of stuff. In this new kind of AI landscape, how do they remain relevant? What should they do? And again, like, I don't know, I'm sure this could be a day's workshop in its own right. But are there any sort of top tips that you can share with people on what can they consider in their marketing, online marketing, to make sure that they remain relevant or as relevant as possible in this new kind of AI landscape?
Yeah, that's the overall approach is the first place to look at. So it is important to treat this optimizing for AI not as a disruption, not as a bug that needs to be fixed, but as an amendment to your current process. This is not going to go away. This will require you to rethink this process. Um, the main thrust of your rethink should be to expand your idea of a user journey into a much more granular context. And I'll give you an example of that. Perhaps, Charles, you're a photographer. The, let's say that I run a website that sells cameras, right? And I have got a user journey that says that, oh, a user might come in from
Hmm.
Google, from a search, having searched the keyword digital SLR. What's happening now is that the same manager needs to think not about that user journey in these broad terms, I mean, much narrower ones, as in, I'm looking for a 40 megapixel camera with fantastic black and white or video support or something like that. I already have this. And then based on that context, ChatGPT will send that customer over to me. So the content, the approach that I take to design my content is actually a lot narrower, it's a lot more specific going forward.
Okay, so it's more about creating more niche content that therefore the
Exactly.
AI engines, large language models can just soak up and yeah, okay.
About answering real world questions. Because when you go over to conduct that search, you go with your particular needs, context in mind. So you
Yeah,
need
yeah.
to capture all these things. You need to answer these questions.
Interesting. Interesting. Thanks.
A little related to that, Theo, like marketing is very close to my heart, and I'm of course like monitoring a lot of the implications of AI towards marketing, and this has been an excellent overview based on this study, Theo. It's really great to hear that. I have an additional question, like from a company perspective. So, as a company, what will be your top 3 tips to take advantage of the insights or findings that you just elaborated on?
Absolutely. A leading question, if I've ever heard one. But the first answer has to be to kind of tool up. Listen to what Giles said, selective about your vendors, but find a ranking tool that is geared towards AI optimization. They are out there. The field is moving very fast, so you might need to experiment with a few of them. They have got their own strengths, but there are tools out there to help you visualize and manage the process. The second one is optimize for machine readability, for your content to be ingested by AI. There's a whole bunch of best practices here, semantic, look at your schema, look at the way that you structure your content in terms of questions and FAQs and all these things that are very popular, all these things. The third and the most important one is, of course, to speak to a specialist like Rutger on this one. Find an AI special CMO. Hence the leading question. I knew where this was going, Rutger, by the way. Yeah. Find a
Yes, I
specialist.
do.
Is probably the best advice on this. The field is moving extremely fast. So anything that we tell you now might have moved on in a few weeks' time from now. People like us, we make it our jobs to read up on what's happening, to kind of have podcasts like this, to explain those trends. And when things keep moving, and if you do feel that your traffic or your message control is under threat, you will need specialist help for that.
That's amazing, Theo, and very helpful. Yeah, I think it's coming to your point on guidance and advice. This is something that I think a lot of companies struggle with to understand where to start. Um, of course, this can be in marketing, but also in other areas. Yeah, I noticed a lot of companies don't know where to start and how to start. And I think the answer that you provided is really great in type of like guidance where we can also help.
Yeah, brilliant. Giles, any closing remarks before we summarize?
No, I was going to say it was all really useful. That's good to know. I think the key observation I would have there as well is, and this might be a British phrase. I don't know how well it translates, is to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. So
Good
obviously
one.
all your existing practices are still relevant, and making stuff that's readable and ranks well on traditional search engines will still be useful. And we're not talking about pivoting totally away from those. I think you still need, so actually having, I completely agree with the point you made, bringing in an expert or experts that actually have a good background in that and are now bringing an AI lens onto that as well, I think is going to kind of be really useful for most businesses. So yeah, no, great stuff.
Absolutely. And from a photographer, of course, we would expect the AI lens, which we're gonna maybe dig into to
Yeah, we can
follow up.
we can talk about that maybe on the next episode. Yeah.
Amazing. So, as we're coming to the end of the episode, you can clearly spot a line that runs through all these topics. And this will be a constant theme throughout this podcast. We think that when it comes to AI adoption, businesses need to be thoughtful, but they also need to be bold. As Giles said, a market correction will come sooner or later, but that should not derail your plans if you select your vendors carefully. Otherwise, you can continue to think big. Thinking big in 2026 means agentic. As Rutger warned us, there will be obstacles to overcome, but if you deploy it wisely, agentic can unlock unbelievable value for your business. Finally, with over a third of ChatGPT users focusing on search and finding stuff, the implications from brand visibility and SEO are becoming clear. Prepare early, and then you not only get to defend your position, you get to build on it. That's it for today. We will be back with another episode in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, we would love to hear from you. Please send us your questions and feedback using the links in the description. We were beside ourselves to have you with us. Thanks for listening.
Thanks a lot.